In this video, I answer the question, how long should I pray for the same thing? Here we talk about persistence in prayer. Let's get into it. Let's start with a story about Judge Muller. Judge Muller was a powerful man of faith and prayer that ran some orphanages in Bristol in England. He did amazing things and received millions of dollars worth of funding for the orphanages that he led without having to ask money from anyone. He basically just prayed and the money came in. So let's read something from his testimony. This comes from a book by Basil Miller on Judge Muller, and it's found in page 145 to 146. Judge Muller writes, in November 1844, I began to pray for the conversion of 5 individuals. I prayed every day without a single intermission, whether sick or in health, on the land or on the sea, and whatever the pressure of my engagements might be. 18 months elapsed before the first of the 5 was converted. So it took 18 months for one person to come to faith. 18 months of praying daily without skipping a day. He continues, I thanked God and prayed for the others. 5 years elapsed, and then the second was converted. I thanked God for the second and prayed for the other 3. Day by day, I continued to pray for them, and 6 years passed before the third was converted. 6 years of praying every day without missing, regardless of what was happening, whether he was sick or he was well. I thanked God for the 3 and went on praying for the other 2. These 2 remained unconverted. The man to whom, this is a quote, the man from him, the man to whom God in the riches of his grace has given tens of thousands of answers to prayer in the self-same hour or day in which they were offered, has been praying day by day for nearly 36 years. 36 years for the conversion of these individuals, and yet they remained unconverted. In reality, Judge Muller had about 50,000 answers to prayers in his lifetime, and about 30,000 of them occurred within 24 hours of the time the prayers were offered. That's amazing. And so for 36 years he has been praying, and these people have not been converted. He continues, but I hope in God. I pray on and look yet for the answer. They are not converted yet, but they will be. He is very confident that they will be. This was the faith that carried him through every straitened place. He met emergencies by asking, and in due time, God supplied whatever the need might be. Those prayers, you ask? In 1897, those 2 men, sons of a friend of Mr. Muller's youth, were not converted after he had entreated God in their behalf for 52 years. So for 52 years, Judge Muller prayed every day for the same people to be saved, and they were not yet saved. I'm only 36 years old, so this is almost unbelievable, the amount of commitment. So since I was born, Judge Muller prayed every day for the same thing and still continued, because he prayed for 52 years. And many of you who are listening to this may not be 52. So since you were born, somebody has been praying for the same thing every day and has not given up. But let's read the conclusion. But after his death, God brought the 2 of them in the fold. The 2 of them were saved. This is an amazing testimony to commitment in prayer. In fact, other accounts show that one of these 2 people came to faith during Mr. Muller's last sermon that he offered a few months before he died. He may not have known about it, but the story came out afterwards that the guy was saved, but he actually accepted Christ during his last sermon, and then the other one accepted Christ, and all of them were saved within 1 year or so after his death. Let's listen to Jesus' perspective. And I'm going to read a story to you from Luke 11 rather. Luke 11, 5 to 8. And in this story, Jesus just finished praying at a certain place, as it is listed in verse 1. And when he finished praying, his disciples asked him, "Lord, teach us to pray, just as John taught his disciples." Then Jesus proceeds to teach them the Lord's Prayer. And after he taught them the Lord's Prayer, which we all know by memory, then he continued in verse 5. Then he said to them, "Suppose one of you has a friend and goes to him at midnight and says to him, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves, for a friend of mine has come to me from a journey, and I have nothing to set before him.' And from inside he answers and says, 'Do not bother me. The door has already been shut, and my children and I are in bed. I cannot get up and give you anything.' I tell you, even though he will not get up and give him anything because he is his friend, yet because of his shamelessness, he will get up and give him as much as he needs." Some versions render this as persistence, but the Greek word actually is shamelessness. And it continues, "So I say to you, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened." Jesus clearly is teaching here on the importance of persistence, to keep knocking, to keep knocking, to keep knocking. Every day you go and ask God. Every day you go and ask God. And you don't give up until the door is opened. Jesus guarantees that everyone who asks receives. Everyone who seeks finds. Everyone who knocks, it will be opened. It is guaranteed. Now, let's look at another illustration that Jesus gave on the importance of persistence. This one is found in Luke 18, 1 to 8. Now he was telling them a parable to show that at all times they ought to pray and not to lose heart, saying, "In a certain city there was a judge who did not fear God and did not respect man. There was a widow in that city, and she kept coming to him, saying, 'Give me legal protection from my opponent.' For a while he was unwilling, but afterward he said to himself, 'Even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will give her legal protection. Otherwise, by continually coming, she will wear me out.' And the Lord said, 'Hear what the unrighteous judge said. Now, will not God bring about justice for his elect who cry to him day and night?'" Realize here, Jesus says, "who cry to him day and night." Day and night, day and night. Showing that you're going to be doing that day and night and continue to do that. It says, "Will not God bring about justice for his elect who cry to him day and night? And will he delay long over them? I tell you that he will bring about justice for them quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?" Again, it is apparent from this story, it needs no explanation. Jesus is again teaching here that it is important to keep going to God and presenting your case. He's not teaching that we should engage in vain repetition, which he clearly teaches against. But we should day in and day out, day in and day out, day and night, go to God with the same request until God grants us the answers that we're seeking. Now, let's look at something that Dr. Are Torre termed spiritual laziness. And I'm going to read a little bit from his book called How to Pray. Many people call it submission to the will of God when God does not grant them their requests at the first or second asking. And they say, well, perhaps it is not God's will. As a rule, this is not submission, but spiritual laziness. We do not call it submission to the will of God when we give up after one or two efforts to obtain things by action. We call it lack of strength of character. When the strong man of action starts out to accomplish a thing, if he does not accomplish it the first or second or 100th time, he keeps hammering away until he does accomplish it. And the strong man of prayer, when he starts to pray for a thing, keeps on praying until he prays through and obtains what he seeks. We should be careful about what we ask from God, but when we do begin to pray for a thing, we should never give up praying for it until we get it, or until God makes it very clear and very definite to us that it is not His will to give it. Okay, now, so after having put you through all this information, how long should you pray for the same thing? Well, you pray for it until you get an answer. Now, the caution I'm going to give is that before you start praying, make sure it is God's will. There's a way to know that it is God's will before you start praying. Don't stop in the middle when it's not been answered to find God's will. Find out what God's will is before you start praying. And in a different video that I'm going to produce, I'll show you how to determine what God's will is before you start engaging in prayer. So that when you start praying, you're going to pray like George Muller. You're going to pray like Jesus recommended until you get what you're looking for. You're going to pray persistently.